Prepare to land.
Your Grace,
The dwarf has played his little trick.
the wildfire,
He can only play it once.
fire, there are archers. Hundreds will die.
Thousands. Come with me and take this city!
Stannis Baratheon is one of the most interesting non-POV characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, and very deserving of being a fan-favorite character. But as someone who really does enjoy Stannis as a character, I believe that a lot of people misunderstand why Stannis is so well written to begin with. The most common analysis that I hear about Stannis Baratheon on the internet is that he is some form of lawful neutral, that he's an honest man trying to be an honest king. And I believe that this partial misunderstanding about Stannis comes from the fact that the way in which Stannis is spoken about in the books is very biased in his favor. Not only that, but the character who gives the most of this information doesn't have the full story like the audience does, that being Davos Seaworth. And as far as A Dance with Dragons, it's safe to say that Stannis Baratheon is no longer a lawful man due to his own decision-making throughout the main series. Now, the first thing we have to understand here is the definition of lawful neutrality, not just in our own world, but in A Song of Ice and Fire. Lawful neutrality is also known as the judge or disciplined alignment. A lawfully neutral character typically believes strongly in lawful concepts such as honor, order, rules, and tradition. This is often accompanied by a personal code. Furthermore, a lawful neutral society would typically enforce strict laws to maintain social order and place a high value on traditions and historical precedent. And I will say that at the start of the series, Stannis Baratheon can be described as a lawfully neutral man. He believes wholeheartedly in tradition, he backs concepts such as law and order, and is even willing to make hard decisions, such as mutating his friend Davos Seaworth for being a criminal, even though his criminal activities saved Stannis' life. Stannis, by all accounts, is a just man, to the point where his belief system seems to take precedent over his own personal enjoyment in life. And this makes Stannis not only a highly interesting character, but also kind of highly likable, or at least in theory. In a world full of liars, schemers, manipulators, and degenerates, having a character who truly believes in upholding the law and having a no-nonsense way about him, at the start of Book 2, a character that may seem like someone to root for. Except, Stannis is slipping, and becoming a symbol of hypocrisy that is going back on everything that he once stood for. And this all starts not with the first Davos chapter, but with the prologue of A Clash of Kings. The prologue of A Clash of Kings, which is one of my favorite chapters in the entire series, finds Maester Cressen, who is a father figure for Stannis, in a very difficult situation. After Melisandre, who seems to be this kind of fire sorceress, enters Stannis Baratheon's life, Stannis starts to change rapidly, and Cressen recognizes this. Stannis, who is supposed to be a man who stands for honor, tradition, and a more honest way of doing things, is all of a sudden breaking tradition and changing big things rapidly. Stannis begins this by first removing Cressen as his head maester in favor of someone younger who believes in the Lord of Light, which is incredibly symbolic of Stannis leaving behind this old way of living and thinking for a newer and possibly more powerful one. To make matters worse for Stannis, he has taken on a new god, the Lord of the Light. And the Lord of Light isn't a popular god in the Seven Kingdoms. While it has its following, it's still a very new way of thinking. And for a member of House Baratheon, who has been following the religion of the Seven for hundreds of years, to randomly break tradition and follow a new god runs against everything that Stannis supposedly believes in. This isn't so subtly symbolized through Stannis changing his house banner to a stag in a flaming heart. To make matters worse, Stannis is burning people as sacrifices to the Lord of the Light. Again, customs that are not part of the traditions that he's been following his entire life. This is also why I believe Cressen dies at the end of the prologue. Cressen, being a father figure for Stannis, is the symbolic manifestation of the belief systems that Stannis used to follow. Cressen is older. He follows older traditions, he believes in the laws and customs that he's known his whole life, and this is precisely why he feels so guilty about using poison, because he knows and believes that it's cowardly. And this is exactly why, after the death of Maester Cressen, Stannis Baratheon goes on a vicious downward spiral of hypocrisy, where he will slowly shed many of the lawful and honest traits that he once had. And the most disastrous example of this is the assassination of Renly Baratheon. In Book 2, after a failed attempt at brokering peace with Renly, Stannis finds himself in a bind. At this point, Renly's army is much larger than his, and open war would mean a loss for Stannis. So with that not being a choice, the only other lawful one would be to challenge Renly to a trial by combat. Just the two heads of the armies fighting it out to avoid mass bloodshed. And I believe that Stannis, pre-Melisandre, may have made this decision. But instead, Stannis decides to do the most despicable thing that he possibly could have in this situation. Stannis, using blood magic, creates a shadow of himself to sneak into Renly's tent and assassinate him. And by every metric in this moment, Stannis has broken every tradition that he has ever stood for, becoming a walking embodiment of hypocrisy and anything but lawful. And the irony of all of it is Stannis Baratheon himself deep down knows and acknowledges this. During one of his best moments, where he talks about Renly and his peach, you can hear a great bit of shame and guilt in his words. Deep down, Stannis knows he's a kinslayer, which is the lowest of the low in Westerosi custom. And deep down, he hates himself for it. Stannis knows he's lost what he once prided himself on, and that is why, in A Dance with Dragons, he chooses to leave Melisandre at the wall. One of the things that I actually like the most about Stannis is his arc isn't one-dimensional or going in a straight line. After the death of Renly and the loss at the Blackwater, there is a shift in Stannis' moral compass. He seems to be, more often than not, aware of the BS that Melisandre is spewing and is actively trying to use her as least as possible. This is not to say that he's back to just being a lawful good person. Like Stannis himself says, a good deed doesn't wash out the bad, and a bad one doesn't wash out the good. But it's still good to note that Stannis isn't one-note evil and bad. He's a man in conflict that's made some good decisions and some terrible ones. And for the final part of this video, what I want to go over is Stannis' potential future in the Winds of Winter, and how his hypocrisy will end up being the death of him. To explain this, I want to draw attention to a character from Greek mythology who parallels Stannis in many ways: Agamemnon. Some of their parallels include both men not necessarily being loved by their men or being naturally charismatic, but being placed in the position of power due to blood right and feeling that it is their duty to do so. Agamemnon starts a brutal feud with Achilles to assert his dominance, even at the cost of his army's morale and strength. very much how Stannis refuses to bend to anyone, and alienated his brother Renly as a potential ally, and also weakening his army. And by far the biggest reason I'm bringing up Agamemnon is what he ends up doing to his daughter and the consequences of his actions. At the start of the Trojan War, Agamemnon's fleet is stuck. They have no wind, no movement, just a bunch of ships waiting on the shore and an army that is growing restless. And the main reason is the goddess Artemis is angry, so she's stalling everything. And the only way to fix it, the only way to keep moving forward, is to give her a sacrifice. Not a lamb, not a prisoner, but Agamemnon's own daughter. And the tragic part is, Agamemnon doesn't want to do it. He knows what it means, he knows how wrong it is, he even hesitates, but in the end, he gives in. He chooses the war, he chooses the throne, he chooses the gods, because in his mind, the fate of the army and the legacy of who he is far more important than the life of one innocent child, even if that child is his own daughter. And that's what makes him tragic. Not that he enjoyed doing this to his daughter, but that he did it anyway, because he let his duty swallow up who he was as a person. And due to the fact that George R.R. Martin himself has confirmed that Stannis will burn Shireen in the Winds of Winter, I believe that Agamemnon's story is meant to be a mirror to Stannis's, which also informs my theory on how Stannis will die. After Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter and returns home, his wife becomes enraged with his decision and assassinates him. And I think this would be an incredibly tragic and fitting ending for Stannis Baratheon. To be murdered by the wife that he forgot about for committing the crime of murdering her child. This also just sort of fits with her ending in the TV show, but adds a whole other level of trauma and tragedy to the story in a way that only George R. R. Martin can make it happen. All in all, Stannis Baratheon is a tragic hypocrite that lost what once made him a good, lawfully neutral person. And like many characters in Greek tragedies, what will be Stannis' downfall won't be something mystical or otherworldly like the others, but something very human. His own pride and desire for duty.